Now that we understand our fundamental priorities, we really have to ask a simple question. What is required for healthy cellular function and for good communication between and among the brain, the hormones, and the immune system? What we want to do is bring it down to a point of practical application, meaning what things can we test for through standard diagnostic testing or perhaps some specialty tests? What things can we look for that actually is going to help us understand where the problem comes from and what we can do about it? So we can realign those priorities and create different terminology for them. One of the first things that we're looking to do is to make sure the cells have the ability to make energy. And we have several different energy producing systems in the body, but by far our most efficient and productive one is called oxidative phosphorylation. Now you don't need to remember that term. All you have to remember is that the greatest source of energy for your cells comes from burning glucose or blood sugar in the presence of oxygen. So for example, one of the priorities that we have when we assess our clients is to make sure they do or do not have a condition called anemia. And anemia is a condition where the red blood cells of the body don't deliver oxygen to the cells on an efficient manner. And quite often we'll have people who will come in to consult with us and say, well, I've been sick my whole life and I've also been anemic my whole life. And that makes perfect sense to me why they have always struggled with their health. So priority number one is to look for or to rule out anemia type conditions. The second priority, and this is a very close second priority, is actually looking at blood sugar. If we say that our greatest source of energy production comes from burning blood sugar in the presence of oxygen, then it makes sense that blood sugar control has got to be a critical priority for us. Now we can have several different types of blood sugar control problems, and we have several different tests that give us an indication of whether or not that's occurring on a proper basis. But this also includes things like diet. So diet, as well as what happens to the food inside your body once you eat it, all determines your blood sugar control. And if we can burn that blood sugar in the presence of oxygen, then we make sufficient amounts of ATP or energy to make the cells or to help the cells do their job. So priority number one is oxygen delivery to the cells. Priority number two is blood sugar control. Again, a very close third priority is to look at your adrenal system. Now, the adrenal system is probably best known as being part of your fight or flight response or part of your stress response system. One of the critical functions that the adrenal system and its main hormone cortisol plays is the ability to regulate and control blood sugar. So you can see why these two are very intimately related. In fact, priorities 2 and 3 there, I really consider to be part of the same function, because you can't have a blood sugar problem without having an adrenal issue, and you certainly can't have an adrenal issue without having a corresponding blood sugar problem. So if we understand that the adrenal system is what helps us to respond to all different varieties of stress, like we talked about before, not just the psychological, but the physical as well as the physiological, and we throw that into the mix as well, then having abnormal stress responses or insufficient stress responses actually impairs our ability to create energy for cells, very simply. And in reality, when I go through these priorities with clients who are in the office, I have them numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., but I actually tell them that they could just easily be numbered 1A, 1B, 1C, and so on, because those priorities are so very closely related and very closely packed. Moving on to priority number 4, this has to do with the immune system. And by now this should make sense that it's a priority, because we know it's part of the neuroendocrine immune system that actually controls all function and all human physiology. So if we have challenges to the immune system, for example, chronic infections, and they can occur in a couple of different places, like you can have a chronic virus floating around in your bloodstream. You may have a chronic infection in your gastrointestinal system. Maybe one of the more commonly known ones might be Candida. You may have chronic fungal infections, and that, of course, Candida is a type of fungus. Or somebody may have an autoimmune disease, and we're finding autoimmune issues more prevalent as society gets sicker and sicker. So we have to place immune control or immune balance right up there at the top of the list. Now, interestingly enough, when we look at the immune system, we understand that about 70% of the immune system is actually housed within the gut, within the gastrointestinal system. And as a result of this, we can break this priority number 4 down into subcategories, and we would include the gut in that. What we've known instinctively over several decades in alternative nutritional healthcare is that the gut is intimately important for health and well-being. It's not just about absorbing and digesting nutrients. That, of course, is a critical function, but it's about your immune system. And if it's about your immune system, it's about your master control system too. So priority number 4 focuses on chronic immune challenges or things like autoimmune disease. And then priority number 5 is the thyroid. And this goes back to our turning our cells on, that cellular activation component. All of your cells have thyroid receptors, and that's your bone cells, your brain cells, your pancreas, your gallbladder, your skin, your muscle, your hair, etc. All of these cells have inside them thyroid receptor, which actually sits on the DNA. Now we know DNA is what controls our genes. It is part of our genetic background. And when we are able to turn on our DNA, the cells can make things like proteins and enzymes and other cellular constituents that make the cells healthy. They make the energy factories that actually create ATP or energy within the cell. So if we have suboptimal thyroid function or altered thyroid function, we compromise almost all aspects of cellular function. And in fact, this is across all systems. This is not specific just to the thyroid. So under cases of thyroid dysfunction, every system in the body suffers. Now, it's going to suffer, different systems will suffer to different degrees in different people, and that's just because of the genetic background of those individuals. And we have to honor the fact that we're all biochemically unique and individual. The fact remains that if you have a thyroid problem, that you're suffering function globally, and that's important. Now, if we do a good job of regulating and controlling all of these priorities, and these are what I consider our short-term priorities. This is our starting point. This is our template, so to speak, of assessing where you are today. And we would do this through a functionally oriented blood chemistry analysis, or a blood chemistry analysis that's focused in on wellness and on those functional ranges that we reviewed earlier. But ultimately what we want to do is make sure that not only do we address the concerns for today, but we do things to mitigate the major stealer of life and joy in North American society, which is cardiovascular disease. And that has to do with heart and brain health. And within this category, we would include things like stroke and heart attack and dementias, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, etc. But we know that the health of the brain and the heart are predicated on each of these 5 preceding priorities. So again, if we do a good job in controlling any problems that we find in the first 5 categories, then we know that we're doing quite a bit to promote health and well-being within the cardiovascular system and doing a lot to reduce your risk for things like stroke and heart attack. So that's our prioritization system. So now when we look at the prioritization system, you may ask the question, well, what kinds of things can you find in there? And we have quite a long list, and really actually this is just a partial list of things that we could potentially find. But what I've done is I've just added a few things here just for reference. So I'm not going to read through this entire list here. You can pause the presentation if you want and just take a look at these things, but I just wanted you to see a glimpse of the things that we can potentially find when we go through a very well put together functionally oriented evaluation using standard blood chemistry. And this is the same type of testing that is used by medical physicians across the world. But remember, our perspective is different. Our focus is on fundamental priorities, our focus is on health and well-being, and our focus is on homeostasis and balance. Not throwing away the basis of if you have a disease that's bad and we need to make sure we address that, but looking for areas where your body is losing homeostasis, where you may not have developed a disease process yet, but we want to do everything not only to recover function and health and well-being, but to prevent that disease that may be coming down the road ever from actually presenting itself in your lifetime. So after we go through our evaluation, what we end up with is actually kind of a review and a matrix, so to speak, a snapshot of where you stand. And this is a theoretical example, but if you decide that you want me to help you and we go through this process of evaluation, I'll end up presenting the same type of information based on you and your unique situation and your blood test results. So we look at each of these fundamental priorities, and I can present you with almost a scorecard or a report card of all of the major factors that we're dealing with you. And I understand that some of these terminologies may be a little bit unfamiliar to you, but please rest assured that if we get to this point that I'm going to explain all the details of each of these things so that you really truly understand what it is you're dealing with and eventually what we can do about it. Remember our personal philosophy. We actually want to make sure that we spend enough time to do a better job for you and provide answers, results, and hope that you may have not had in the past.